All right, Alexander, let's talk about the elections in the United States, the primaries in the United States, South Carolina specifically, where Trump beat Nikki Haley by a good 20 points in her home state of South Carolina. That's not the big news. That hasn't surprised anybody that Trump won South Carolina or that he won by such a big margin. I think the question that everyone is asking is why is Nikki Haley still in this? Why does she refuse to step aside?
You know,
And there are a
I
lot of different theories and narratives,
yeah,
but that's what everyone is wondering. What are your
you know,
thoughts?
I have to say, I mean, I've thought about this a lot because, I mean, logically, it makes absolutely no sense now. I mean, if we look at the way the primaries have gone, the whole Nikki Haley project has been a complete failure in every single one. I mean, the breakthrough primary, it was expected would be New Hampshire, and she failed there. And that was a shock. The Iowa caucuses were a huge shock and caused a shock in Europe, by the way. It was in the Iowa caucuses, the result of the Iowa caucuses, when the Europeans finally began to understand that the Nikki Haley project was going to fail, and they'd staked a lot on it. And now she's failed. She's lost in her own home state where she was governor. And looking on to Super Tuesday, which is in about a week's time, she's not going to win there either. I mean, so this primary race, it makes absolutely no sense for her to keep going. Now, I've thought about this a lot, and I have come to the conclusion, actually, that there were two factors which were keeping Nikki Haley in the race. Obviously, she's not discussed this with me, so I don't know. But factor one was money. She was getting lots and lots of money. She was extremely well resourced and funded by all her donors. And of course, that funding will remain in her campaign, available for her to use going forward. So, in the next presidential election in 4 years' time, there'll be that big pot of money already to start with. And who knows, that money could be used for all kinds of other things. So that's one factor. I think in that respect, she's had the rug pulled under her now because the Koch brothers have now indicated that they're no longer going to fund her anymore. So one of the biggest funders has now pulled out. They're saying, what's the point? Why are we throwing money into this failed enterprise? But I think up to this point, that was one factor. But I think there was another factor too, and it relates to all the court cases against Trump, the disqualification exercise, all of that kind of thing. And I think at some level, she was saying to herself, even if he wins in every single primary, if he is stopped from going forward to the election, provided I keep going, I am still there. So if he stopped, I'm there and available as a potential Republican nominee to take his place. I suspect that was the calculation, not just her calculation, but also the calculation of many of the people who have been backing her.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. She must be being told this by various officials or permanent state members, Democrat officials maybe. Stay in this race. Stay in this race because we're not yet done with Trump yet. We'll find something to knock Trump out of this. So just stick in this race a little longer. So how does she stay in this thing without money?
Well, this is it. I think the point is that I think that this particular um, project, despite all of that calculation, I think it's starting to run its course. And partly the reason is that she has made no dent on Trump at all in the primaries. If she'd done better in New Hampshire and in Iowa, and if she'd held Trump to say a 10% margin, not a 20% margin in South Carolina, then we might be in a different situation. She'd have had some delegates to take with her to the Republican convention. It would have looked as if she was in a position to step in. But the problem is that it's looking increasingly now as if the Supreme Court of the United States is going to come down on Trump's side over the disqualification issue and do so perhaps even unanimously and in a big way. That's the rumor, that's the talk. And to be frank, I think the court cases, the various court cases, are not playing out as expected and are starting to unravel. We've had this very bizarre decision in New York, but it seems that Trump has decided to pay the amount, to put up the bond, which will enable him to go forward to appeal. And he's probably going to be able to find the money to do that. And it's difficult to imagine this decision surviving in an appeal. I ought to acknowledge him, my debt to Robert Barnes. I've been in contact with him about this. And he says that if the Supreme Court of the United States does have jurisdiction over this case also. So assuming that the New York appeal fails, and it's logically, it should not fail. He can take it to the Supreme Court of the United States and argue that the decision violates his rights under the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. So that case is starting to look shaky because, to be frank, it's so completely unbalanced. I mean, you need to look at Jonathan Turley's analyses to see why. He's got it all set out very clearly. And the Georgia case, which I think a lot of people were expecting would play out worse, well, there's all the problems with the Georgia prosecutors, which have gained lots of news. And the two Jack Smith cases don't look particularly strong either. So the cases are starting to creak, and it's perhaps premature to say that they're unraveling, but it doesn't look like they're going to stop Trump. So with Haley failing to break through in any of the primaries, you're starting to see her donors, the Koch brothers, amongst others. And I suspect the Koch brothers are only going to be the first. They're saying to themselves, look, this isn't flying. We're just throwing good money after bad. It doesn't make any sense. It does look now increasingly as if it's going to be Trump versus Biden. And we have to face that reality and decide what we're going to do faced with that choice.
Yeah, that's why they're bringing out Russiagate 2.0. Or is it Russiagate 3.0? I don't even know what point of Russiagate exactly. We are on, to be quite honest, but that's why we're getting back into the Russiagate narrative, because the Democrats are starting to understand that it's going to be Trump Biden. And so now they're pivoting to Putin, of course. Who else, right?
Well, yeah, it's not going to be Trump Biden, it's going to be Putin Biden. that's how they're going to try to. You're absolutely correct. You are entirely right. And I want to say again, I mean, the way some people are talking, too many people are talking, it's as if, this is a done thing, that if it's Trump Biden, Trump wins, Biden loses. Nothing in American politics at this time is as simple as that. This race is far from open. This whole issue is far from closed.
Yeah, who knows what they can manufacture, especially when you bring in Russia and Putin from now until November to try and derail Trump. Yeah. Once the lawfare ends.
Or you come up with something else, and you talk up the threat to democracy, of which there's been article after article pounding away at this, and you talk all of that up, and for all I know, there'll be unrest. I'm using a very carefully chosen word, but there'll be unrest again. in many of the American cities, we could be in for a very stormy summer.
All right. We will end it there. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop. 50% off all t-shirts. Take care.